I think one of the aspects of life, as it's assumed to be, that makes it tricky, is that within ordinary experience, there is the realization that experience is happening. You know, there's reflection. We could say, well, we are having this experience of this conversation. And that capacity to know or to realize that there is experience seems to very powerfully reinforce the idea that there is a knower. There is a subject who is having the experience. Liberation is the realization that that realization is just something else that's appearing. It doesn't mean that there's a separate someone. But until it's realized, it seems very powerfully to be personal. And what would be the point of turning it into a package? It would complicate something. It's challenging enough already without dressing it up and making it into something that seems very special, and it isn't.
And do you still meditate?
Yes, I like to meditate.
I
enjoy meditation. It doesn't change that which is timeless. It doesn't change being or consciousness. But what appears, yes, it changes.
And when you work with your work, you still you do personal sessions, you do workshops. So, what would be a kind of thing you would work with somebody on? How would you do it? What would be your medium of doing that?
Well, that would vary a great deal depending on the person. Sometimes it would be doing very simple hands-on work with people. More often, it would be talking things through with people. Essentially, helping people find out what the problem is that they're suffering from, or apparently suffering from. I think in all the years that I've practiced, which is over 30 years now, I don't think I've ever met someone whose understanding and belief about what their problem was, their understanding was always wrong. They were never right about what the problem actually was. I think because if we really knew what the problem was, it would have evaporated. So I see the work a lot as helping people to appreciate what's really happening, or what's really causing pain or suffering or frustration or whatever it may be.
And what is that in most people that's causing the pain and frustration?
Well, fundamentally, the sense that there's a separate self, and the contraction that goes along with that in life happens when we're very young, and then to a greater or lesser extent, strains and stresses and resistance builds throughout life, or what appears as the personal life, and that's held in place by assumptions and beliefs, some of which can fall away without there needing to be liberation. And so life can be a lot easier, even though there's still that assumption of separation. So it's mainly contraction, mainly a holding on.
Because it seems to get harder and harder to be a successful me, because there's always this pressure, the media especially. It's kind of, you get your new clothes or your new car, or have the perfect holiday, and then you'll be a better and a happier me.
Yes.
But of course, it's very temporary, and you might feel better for a few days, and then you're a more unhappy me because you spent the money trying to be the happier me. That's
right.
So I think it gets tougher and tougher to actually.
It can do, yeah. But one of the things that has been realised over, not simply after that walk on Hampstead Heath, but for many years, I think it came from initially the practice of meditation, that life needn't be such hard work. There needn't be suffering. So I'm immensely grateful to what I learned as a meditator and as a teacher of meditation, because when I trained as a counselor and then as a therapist, I was sometimes attending seminars where it was assumed that suffering was essential and was part of the human condition and couldn't be resolved. And I didn't believe that. And I still don't believe it. I think it can be resolved, and funnily enough, it's very simple, the resolution. It's challenging because they're old habits, but it's not a very difficult thing to do, to stop straining, to stop struggling, to stop beliefs that are false and give rise to pain and discomfort.
So why doesn't that happen to more people then?
Well, because generally people have, especially in our culture, have learned that the harder you work at something, the more you'll get. Which is true in terms of strain and stress. The harder you work at it, or trying to get rid of it, the more you're likely to have strain. Learning how to stop straining is a challenge, but it's basically very, very simple. But it seems more of a challenge.
How do you do it then?
Well, you don't do it, you stop doing it.
But isn't it like, something is, the juggernaut is on the road,
Right.
it's like it's running and running, and actually to change, I know for myself, to actually change a thought pattern takes tremendous, well, in my experience, tremendous energy somehow, because that is the norm.
Right.
And to change it takes a lot of will.
It can do, or you could just release your breathing. Because the juggernaut of thinking patterns is sustained by contraction in the body. And one of the most obvious effects of that is the restriction in the breathing. So if the breathing is released, just in an ordinary way, the intensity of thought patterns will ease. And it's impossible to have that juggernaut going unless there's some restriction in the breathing. So learning about something like that, learning how to let the breath be easy, to let the mental focus soften. The mental focus, which is simply contraction. It's a strange thing that became clear after liberation, that the belief that there's something called attention that can be focused externally was a complete fantasy. It's a complete fantasy. In fact, all that happens is that this, for example, seeing the glass on the table and putting attention on it is simply contracting a little bit. There's a little contraction around the eyes and restriction of the breathing, and it makes it seem as if something's being projected over there. It's not happening at all. There's simply contraction. And it's quite simple to learn to let that contraction ease. And when it does, what you call the juggernaut of thought and struggle starts to fall away. And it's not that it completely dissolves and never returns, but with a little practice and the practice is essentially stopping the strain, which is effortless, life becomes easier, more comfortable. It's hard work to suffer.
And it's sad that so many people do suffer,
It's very
really,
sad.
because there's
It's
many
tragic.
beautiful things about life, and so many people struggle, and you wonder where it all leads on a planetary basis, because it seems to get more and more.
Absolutely.
And the more people have, unfortunately, seem to get further away from any kind of resolution.
Yeah, I agree with you.
So you feel that the breath is the key in most situations?
Well, it's one of them. It's not the only thing. It's the most obvious and the easiest to communicate immediately. Essentially, it is about the breath, but the breath and the strain around the eyes and the tightening in the body and the solar plexus, at the back of the head and neck, all of that comes from the assumption that there's somebody inside doing something. So when there's a sense that there's a me in here, there's a little contraction that reinforces that. And I'm doing something, I'm focusing attention here or there, and there's contraction. And when people learn that that can soften or ease, then it's harder to suffer. There's a pull to get back into contraction because it's such a habit, but there's also a desire for the well-being. And so